When I told my daughter I wouldn't drain my retirement fund for her $65,000 wedding, she cut me out of her life with a single blocked number. 3 weeks of silence. 3 weeks of wondering if I'd ever meet my unborn grandson. Then came the call, soft, vulnerable, asking for reconciliation over dinner at the restaurant where my late husband and I celebrated our silver anniversary. I should have known better. I walked into Franco's that evening believing in second chances, only to find 3 men in dark suits waiting at our table, briefcases open, a power of attorney document spread across the white tablecloth like a trap. My daughter looked me in the eyes, those eyes I'd gazed into the moment she was born, and delivered her ultimatum with the precision of a closing argument. Sign it, mother, or you'll never see your grandson grow up. The restaurant noise faded to nothing. My hands didn't shake. I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, and made a single call. When I looked up at those lawyers, at my daughter's cold expression, at her fiancé's practiced smile, I said with a calm that surprised even me, "Of course I'll sign. But first, someone wants to say a few words." But before I tell you what happened next, I need you to hear the whole story, because what they didn't know was that I'd been 3 steps ahead of them the entire time. If you're watching this, please take a moment to like and subscribe. I need to know this story is reaching people who understand what it means to be betrayed by the ones you loved most. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know how far the truth can travel. Because this isn't just my story. It's a warning. My name is Denise Jenkins. I'm 62 years old, and until 3 months ago, I thought I knew what heartbreak was. I buried my husband, Harold, 6 years back. Lung cancer. 43 years of marriage reduced to ashes in an urn on my mantle. I thought that was the worst pain I'd ever feel. Watching the man who built me bookshelves and slow dance with me in the kitchen fade away in a hospice bed. I was wrong. The worst pain is watching your child, the baby you carried, the toddler whose scraped knees you kissed, the young woman whose college tuition you worked double shifts to afford, look at you like you're nothing more than an ATM with a pulse. It started with a phone call. Tanisha's voice was bright, breathless, with that particular excitement I used to love hearing. "Mama, Henry proposed. We're getting married." I cried. I actually cried tears of joy. My baby girl, finally settling down at 34, with a man who had a good job in finance, who wore tailored suits and spoke about investment opportunities and portfolio diversification. The joy lasted exactly 2 weeks. That's when Tanisha and Henry came to my house, my small, paid-off house in a quiet neighborhood where I'd raised both my children alone after Harold's death. They sat on my worn sofa, the one I'd reupholstered myself 3 times because I couldn't afford to replace it, and they presented me with a binder. A binder? Full of venue photos, catering quotes, floral arrangements that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. And at the back, highlighted in yellow like an exam study guide, was a number, $65,000. My expected contribution, as the mother of the bride. I remember laughing. Actually laughing because I thought it was a joke. $65,000. I'm a retired elementary school teacher living on a pension and Social Security. My retirement fund, the one I'd scraped together over 38 years of teaching, the one that was supposed to keep me fed and housed until I died, was just over $100,000. They wanted more than half of my survival. "Tanisha, honey," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I can't do that. But I can give you $15,000. That's generous. That's more than generous. You could have a beautiful wedding with $15,000? Henry cut me off, his smile never wavering. "Mrs. Jenkins, with all due respect, that won't even cover the venue deposit. Tanisha deserves the wedding of her dreams. Tanisha deserves." As if I hadn't already given her everything I had. "I put you through college," I said, looking at my daughter. "I paid for your apartment when you were starting out. I bought your first car. I've been there for every single moment of your life. And now you're being selfish." Tanisha's voice was ice. Pure ice. "This is the most important day of my life, Mama. I'm having a baby. I'm starting a family. And you're telling me that your money is more important than my happiness? My unborn happiness." She actually used her unborn child as a weapon against me. I'm offering you $15,000, I repeated, my voice shaking now. That's not selfish. That's all I can afford without risking my own security. Henry stood up, smoothing his suit jacket. We understand this is difficult for you, Mrs. Jenkins. Take some time to think about it. Family is everything, after all. The threat was clear. They left. Tanisha didn't hug me goodbye. She looked at me with something I'd never seen in her eyes before, contempt mixed with cold calculation, like she was appraising an asset that had just appreciated in value. I stood in my empty living room afterward, staring at the burgundy dress hanging in my closet, the one I'd worn to Tanisha's college graduation, the one I'd been saving to wear to her wedding. I took it down and hung it in the back, behind clothes I never wore anymore. I didn't know then that it would be 3 weeks before I heard from my daughter again. I didn't know that when she finally called, it wouldn't be to apologize. What they didn't know, was that I was about to discover exactly how far they were willing to go. And I was already planning my response. 3 weeks of silence can do strange things to a mother's heart. 21 days of staring at my phone, checking for messages that never came. 21 nights of lying awake, wondering if I'd made the right choice, if I'd been too harsh, if maybe, just maybe, I should have found a way to give them what they wanted. 21 mornings of waking up and remembering that my daughter had chosen money over me. Then, on a Tuesday evening while I was folding laundry in front of the television, my phone rang. Tanisha's name lit up the screen, and I swear my heart stopped beating for a full 3 seconds. I answered on the 4th ring, trying to sound calm, trying not to sound desperate. Hello, baby. Hi, Mama. Her voice was different, softer, almost vulnerable, like the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. I've been thinking a lot. About everything. About what I said to you. I sat down on the couch, my hands trembling so badly, I almost dropped the phone. I've been thinking too, sweetheart. I was so wrong, Mama. So wrong. There was a catch in her voice, like she might cry. These past few weeks, I've been feeling the baby move, and it's made me realize, I've been horrible to you. You've sacrificed everything for me, and I threw it back in your face over a wedding. A wedding, Mama. How could I do that? The relief that flooded through me was almost physical, almost painful. My baby girl was back. The pregnancy hormones, the stress, it had all just been too much for her. She was seeing clearly now. I understand, honey, I said, and I meant it. Pregnancy changes everything. Your body, your emotions, your perspective on what really matters. Exactly that, Mama. Exactly that. She paused, and I could hear her take a deep breath. I want to make this right. I want us to talk, really talk. Can we have dinner? Just you and me, like we used to. Of course, baby. Of course we can. I was already mentally planning what I'd wear, what I'd say, how I'd hug her when I saw her. When and where. How about Friday night? At Franco's? I know it's special to you, and Daddy used to go there. Franco's. The Italian restaurant on Meridian Street where Harold had taken me for our 25th anniversary, where he'd held my hand across the table and told me I was still the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Where I'd ordered the chicken marsala and couldn't finish it because I was crying too hard, overwhelmed by how lucky I was to have built a life with him. The fact that Tanisha remembered that she chose that place specifically, it felt like a sign. Like she was honoring not just me, but her father's memory too. Franco's would be perfect, I managed to say through the lump in my throat. What time, sweetheart? 7 o'clock? I'll make the reservation. I'll be there. Tanisha, I love you, Mama. I never stopped loving you. I love you too, baby girl. So much. When she hung up, I sat there holding the phone against my chest, feeling like I could breathe fully for the first time in weeks. My daughter was coming back to me. The pregnancy had awakened something in her, that deep, primal understanding of what it means to sacrifice for your child. She was about to become a mother herself, and now she understood what I'd been trying to tell her all along. Family was everything. Not weddings. Not marble bathrooms. Not designer gowns and ice sculptures shaped like swans. Just family. Friday evening, I arrived at Franco's 15 minutes early. I'd chosen a simple navy dress, pearls that Harold had given me for our 30th anniversary, and sensible heels. I wanted to look nice, but not like I was trying too hard. This was about reconciliation, not performance. The hostess led me to a table near the back, our usual spot, the one with a view of the small courtyard garden. The white tablecloth was crisp, the lighting was warm and golden, and for a moment I let myself feel hopeful. Genuinely hopeful. Then Tanisha walked in. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before, a designer piece, sleek and fitted, in a deep emerald green that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in 2 months. Maybe 3 months. Her hair was professionally styled, her makeup flawless, and around her neck was a diamond pendant that caught the light with every step. She looked stunning, expensive, untouchable. A small voice in the back of my mind whispered a warning, but I pushed it aside. She was 3 months pregnant now, showing just slightly. Maybe Henry had bought her the dress as a gift. Maybe she wanted to look nice for our reconciliation dinner. "Mama, you look lovely." She kissed my cheek, a quick, perfunctory gesture, and sat down across from me. "Thank you, baby. You look beautiful yourself." I reached across the table for her hand. "How are you feeling? How's the baby?" "Everything's going well." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "The morning sickness has finally stopped, thank goodness." We ordered drinks, sparkling water for both of us, and I launched into the speech I'd been rehearsing for 3 days. How much I loved her, how I wanted to support her in ways that were financially responsible, how we could plan a beautiful wedding within a realistic budget. But before I could finish my second sentence, I saw him. Henry Smith walked through the restaurant entrance, his tall frame unmistakable in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension check. And he wasn't walking alone. Behind him came 3 men in dark suits, each carrying a leather briefcase, their expressions professionally neutral. Lawyers. They looked like lawyers. They moved like lawyers. My blood went cold. "Tanisha," I said slowly, watching the men approach our table. "What's going on here?" She didn't answer. She just looked down at her water glass, her jaw set in that stubborn way she'd had since she was 5 years old. Henry reached our table first, that practiced smile spreading across his face like oil on water. "Mrs. Jenkins, so good to see you again. I hope you don't mind. I thought it might be helpful to have some professional guidance for our conversation tonight." The 3 men arranged themselves around our table like a tribunal. This wasn't a reconciliation dinner at all. This was an ambush. And I'd walked right into it. The restaurant noise, the clinking of silverware, the murmur of other diners' conversations, the soft Italian music playing from hidden speakers, all of it faded into a distant hum as I watched the 3 men settle into chairs that seemed to materialize from nowhere. The intimate table for 2 had become a business conference, and I was the only one who hadn't received the agenda. "Mrs. Jenkins," Henry said, gesturing toward the silver-haired man to his right, "I'd like you to meet Richard Kirk. He's my attorney and a specialist in estate planning and elder law." Richard Kirk extended his hand across the table. I didn't take it. I just stared at it, then at him, then at my daughter, who was still refusing to meet my eyes. "Elder law," I repeated slowly, tasting the words like they were poison. "Is that right?" "That's correct, Mrs. Jenkins." Kirk withdrew his hand without apparent offense, his expression remaining professionally pleasant. "I've been working with Henry and Tanisha for the past few weeks, helping them navigate some complex family financial matters." The past few weeks. While I'd been sitting at home, heartbroken and isolated, they'd been meeting with lawyers. Planning this. Choreographing every word of that phone call, every tremor in Tanisha's voice, every mention of the baby and reconciliation and love. It had all been theater. All of it. I see now. My voice came out steadier than I expected. So when Tanisha called me, crying about how wrong she'd been, about how the baby made her realize what really mattered, that was all scripted, wasn't it? "Mama, please don't be dramatic." Tanisha finally looked up, but her eyes were hard, annoyed, like I was a child throwing a tantrum in a grocery store. We're trying to help you here. Help me. I let out a laugh that didn't sound like my own voice. Help me how exactly? The second man, younger, maybe 40, with wire-rimmed glasses and a manila folder in front of him, spoke up. Mrs. Jenkins, I'm Thomas Brennan, also with Kirk and Associates. What we're proposing tonight is actually quite generous, given the circumstances. What circumstances? I demanded. What circumstances require 3 lawyers at what was supposed to be a mother-daughter dinner? Henry leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his expression shifting into something that probably passed for concern in his circles. Mrs. Jenkins, Denise. May I call you Denise? No, you may not. My hands were clenched in my lap now, fingernails digging into my palms. You may call me Mrs. Jenkins or don't call me anything at all. His smile tightened just slightly. Mrs. Jenkins, then. The truth is, Tanisha and I have been concerned about you. You're 62 years old, living alone in that house, managing your own finances with no oversight or assistance. I've been managing my own finances since I was 18 years old, I said. I think I've done just fine. Have you, though? This came from the third man, who hadn't been introduced yet. He was younger than the others, maybe 35, with dark hair slicked back and an expression that suggested he enjoyed this part of his job. Because from what we understand, you're living on a fixed income, your house needs significant repairs, and you have no long-term care plan in place. My house is fine, and my finances are none of your business. I looked directly at Tanisha now. How do they know about my house? Have you been discussing my private affairs with these people? She had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. Mama, we're just worried about your future. About what happens if something goes wrong, if you get sick, If I die, you mean? The words came out flat, cold. If I die and you want to make sure you have access to whatever's left. That's not fair at all. Henry's voice took on a sharper edge. We're thinking about your welfare, about ensuring you're taken care of in your declining years. My declining years? I was 62, not 92. I still volunteered at the library twice a week. I took yoga classes. I had coffee with my book club every Sunday. I'm in perfect health. Richard Kirk cleared his throat and opened the manila folder in front of him. The sound of paper shuffling seemed unnaturally loud. Mrs. Jenkins, what we're proposing is actually quite straightforward. It's a power of attorney document that would allow Henry and Tanisha to manage your financial affairs on your behalf. He slid the folder across the table toward me. I didn't touch it. I just stared at it like it was a snake coiled on the white tablecloth. Manage my finances, I said softly. You mean take control of my retirement fund? The one you wanted $65,000 from. The one I said no to. This isn't about the wedding anymore, Mama. Tanisha's voice had lost all pretense of softness now. It was businesslike, efficient, the voice of someone closing a deal. This is about making sure you're protected. You're getting older. You're alone. What if something happens? What if you fall, or have a stroke, or develop dementia? I don't have dementia, I said through clenched teeth. I have a daughter who apparently thinks I'm incompetent because I refuse to bankrupt myself for her wedding. Thomas Brennan spoke up again, his tone soothing, practiced. No one is saying you're incompetent, Mrs. Jenkins. This is simply a precautionary measure. Many families implement these arrangements when elderly parents. I'm not elderly. The words came out louder than I intended. A few diners at nearby tables glanced over. I lowered my voice. I'm 62 years old. I'm younger than half the Supreme Court. Henry sighed, a sound of exaggerated patience. Mrs. Jenkins, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. The easy way is you sign this document tonight, willingly, understanding that we only want what's best for you and for Tanisha's growing family. There it was. The threat, delivered with that same practiced smile. And the hard way? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Kirk pulled out another document, this one thinner, with an official-looking seal at the top. The hard way involves a competency evaluation. We have documentation from your neighbors about some concerning behaviors, forgetting to bring in your mail, leaving lights on all night, appearing confused during conversations. My mouth went dry. That's not true at all. None of that's true. We also have statements from service providers about missed payments, confusion about bills. Henry's voice was almost gentle now, the way you'd speak to a frightened child. We don't want to go that route, Denise. We really don't. But if you're not willing to accept help voluntarily, we may have no choice. I looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. The woman sitting across from me, in her expensive dress and diamond pendant, with her 3-month pregnancy barely showing and her eyes as cold as January ice. This wasn't the baby girl I'd raised. This wasn't the child I'd sacrificed for, worked double shifts for, loved unconditionally for 34 years. This was a stranger. A calculating, cold-hearted stranger who'd learned that love could be weaponized. And if I refuse? I asked quietly. If I refuse to sign your power of attorney and refuse to submit to your competency evaluation? Tanisha's hand moved to her stomach, a protective gesture that might have seemed maternal if I didn't know better. When she spoke, her voice was final, rehearsed, devastating. Then you won't see your grandson grow up, Mama. Henry's attorney has already prepared grandparents' rights documentation. In this state, without a pre-existing relationship, you'd have almost no legal standing. And since we haven't allowed you to be part of this pregnancy, she shrugged, the gesture almost casual. Well, there's no relationship to speak of, is there now? My grandson, the baby I'd already been imagining holding, reading to, loving the way I'd loved his mother. They were using him as leverage before he was even born. The restaurant continued its normal rhythm around us, waiters delivering plates of pasta, couples laughing over wine, the smell of garlic and basil hanging in the air. But at our table, everything had gone silent and still, like we existed in a separate dimension where love could be traded for signatures on legal documents. Richard Kirk pushed a pen across the table. It was expensive, heavy, the kind of pen meant for signing important documents. This really is for the best, Mrs. Jenkins. For everyone involved. I stared at that pen, at the manila folder, at the 3 lawyers who'd been paid to orchestrate this ambush, at Henry, with his smug confidence, at my daughter, who just threatened to erase me from her child's life. And then, I did something they weren't expecting. I reached into my purse. My hand disappeared into my purse, and I watched Henry's posture shift slightly, a subtle tensing, like he thought I might pull out a checkbook and just surrender. Richard Kirk leaned back in his chair, already preparing for victory. Thomas Brennan's fingers were poised over his tablet, ready to document my capitulation. They thought they'd won. They thought the threat of losing my grandson, a child not even born yet, would break me completely. My fingers moved past my reading glasses, the ones I used for crossword puzzles on Sunday mornings. Past the small photo I kept tucked in the inner pocket, my children at ages 6 and 10, gap-toothed and grinning on a beach vacation I'd saved for 2 years to afford. Back when Tanisha still looked at me like I hung the moon. I found my phone. What are you doing, Mama? Tanisha's voice had an edge of nervousness now. We need an answer right now. Are you going to sign or not? I pulled out my phone and set it on the table, unlocking it with fingers that were surprisingly steady. The restaurant sounds, the clatter of dishes, the hum of conversation, the soft mandolin music, all of it faded to white noise, like someone had wrapped the world in cotton wool. I'm making a call, I said quietly, scrolling through my contacts. Just one call before I make any decisions. Henry exchanged a glance with Richard Kirk. Mrs. Jenkins, I don't think calling your friends or your pastor is going to change the reality of. I'm not calling my friends. I found the name I was looking for. Marcus. My son. My firstborn. The one who'd inherited his father's steady presence and his mother's stubborn spine. I'm calling my son first. Tanisha's face went pale. Mama, Marcus doesn't need to be involved in this right now. This is between us and... I was already pressing the call button. It rang once. Twice. On the 3rd ring, Marcus answered, his voice tight with the controlled urgency of someone who'd been in the middle of something important. Mom, is everything okay? I'm at the hospital finishing rounds and... Marcus, I need you right now. I kept my voice calm, level, the way I used to when he'd fallen off his bike or Tanisha had gotten in trouble at school. The calm that said this is serious. Pay attention. I need you to come to Franco's restaurant on Meridian Street. Do you know where that is? There was a pause. I could hear beeping machines in the background, the overhead intercom paging a doctor. Franco's? Mom, that's a 40-minute drive from the hospital. What's going on there? Your sister invited me to dinner. I looked directly at Tanisha as I spoke. Except it's not dinner at all. She's here with Henry and 3 lawyers, and they're asking me to sign papers. Power of attorney papers, Marcus. They want control of my finances. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. Then, what did you say? They have papers spread out on the table right now. I could feel tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of these people. They're telling me I'm too old to manage my own affairs. That I need their help. That if I don't sign, I won't be allowed to see Tanisha's baby when he's born. Put me on speaker now. Marcus's voice had dropped into what Tanisha and I used to call his doctor voice, the tone he used when a patient's family was asking stupid questions or when an insurance company was denying necessary treatment. Calm, professional, and absolutely immovable. I tapped the speaker button and set the phone on the table. You're on speaker, sweetheart. Good evening, everyone. Marcus's voice filled the space around our table, and I watched the lawyer's expressions shift from confident to cautious. My name is Dr. Marcus Jenkins. I'm a board-certified emergency medicine physician at Mercy General Hospital, and I'm also Mrs. Denise Jenkins's son and medical power of attorney holder. Henry cleared his throat. Dr. Jenkins, I'm Henry Smith, your sister's fiancé. I assure you this is just a family discussion about... I wasn't finished talking. The edge in Marcus's voice could have cut glass. I'm currently in the middle of my shift, which means I'm leaving my patients to deal with whatever this is. So someone better start explaining right now why my 62-year-old mother, who has no cognitive impairment, no history of financial mismanagement, and no medical conditions that would warrant guardianship, is being pressured to sign over power of attorney. Richard Kirk attempted to regain control. Dr. Jenkins, I'm Richard Kirk, attorney at law. We're simply discussing options for your mother's future care and financial management. Given her age and living situation. Her age. Marcus let out a sharp laugh. My mother is 62 years old. That's younger than most senators. That's younger than the average age of a CEO. Are you suggesting that every 62-year-old in America needs their children to manage their finances? Of course not, but Thomas Brennan started. Then what makes my mother different? Marcus didn't wait for an answer. Let me guess what's really happening here. My sister asked for money for her wedding. My mother, who is financially responsible and who worked for 38 years to secure her retirement, said no. And now you're trying to take control of her assets through legal coercion. The silence at our table was deafening. A waiter approached with water, saw the tension, and quickly retreated. Tanisha found her voice, defensive and sharp. Marcus, you don't understand at all. Mama's alone in that house. She has no support system. We're trying to help her before something bad happens. She has me, Tanisha. The hurt in Marcus's voice was palpable.
She's always had me.
I live 45 minutes away, not 45 states. I check on her twice a week. I handle her medical appointments. So tell me exactly what support system she's missing. We just think, Henry began. I don't care at all what you think. Marcus cut him off. Here's what's going to happen right now. I'm leaving the hospital. I'll be there in 35 minutes, maybe 30. And nobody, and I mean nobody, is signing anything until I arrive and review every single document on that table. I picked up the phone, taking it off speaker, holding it close. Thank you, baby. Hold on, Mom. Just hold on. His voice was softer now, meant only for me. Don't sign anything at all. Don't agree to anything. I'm coming right now. I'll wait, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. I ended the call and looked around the table at the 4 men and 1 woman who'd thought they could bully me into submission. Henry's jaw was tight, his practiced smile completely gone. Richard Kirk was already typing something on his phone. Thomas Brennan and the unnamed third lawyer were exchanging worried glances. And Tanisha, my daughter, my baby girl, was staring at me with something that looked almost like respect mixed with fear. "Well, then," I said, setting my phone down and folding my hands in my lap. "I believe you heard my son. We're going to wait right here." Richard Kirk cleared his throat. "Mrs. Jenkins, perhaps we can reschedule this discussion for another time." "Oh, no, sir." I smiled sweetly, the smile I used to give principals when they tried to discipline my children unfairly. "You all went through so much trouble to set up this dinner meeting. You choreographed phone calls, brought briefcases, prepared documents. The least we can do is wait for all parties to arrive." Henry leaned toward Tanisha, speaking in a low voice that I could still hear perfectly. "Maybe we should just go now. This isn't working out like you planned." I finished for him. "No, I imagine it's not. You see, gentlemen, what you didn't account for is that I have a son who actually loves me. Not my money, not my assets. Just me, his mother." I picked up my water glass, took a long sip, and settled into my chair like I had all the time in the world. "So, let's order some appetizers, shall we?" Marcus said 35 minutes. Maybe 30. And I have a feeling that when he arrives, someone is going to have to say quite a few words. The expensive pen Richard Kirk had pushed toward me was still sitting on the table, untouched. It was going to stay that way. 23 minutes later, I watched my son stride through Franco's entrance like a force of nature barely contained in human form. He was still wearing his hospital scrubs, navy blue with the Mercy General logo on the chest pocket, a stethoscope hanging around his neck, his ID badge clipped to his waistband. His hair was slightly disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it between patients, and there was a coffee stain on his left sleeve that he probably didn't even know was there. But he had his father's presence. That same steady, unshakable energy that Harold used to bring into a room, the kind that made people sit up straighter, speak more carefully, think twice before saying something foolish. Marcus's eyes swept across the restaurant, located our table in the back corner, and locked onto the scene with the clinical precision of someone trained to assess critical situations in seconds. His gaze moved from me to Tanisha to Henry to the three lawyers, taking in the manila folders, the untouched water glasses, the tension hanging over our table like smoke. He reached us in 6 long strides. "Good evening, everyone." He pulled up a chair from a nearby empty table and positioned it between me and the lawyers, creating a physical barrier. "I'm Dr. Marcus Johnson. I apologize for my appearance. I came straight from the ER." Richard Kirk extended his hand. "Dr. Johnson, thank you for joining us. I'm Richard Kirk, and these are my associates." Marcus didn't take his hand. He just looked at it, then at Kirk's face, then at the documents spread across the table. "I didn't come here for introductions or pleasantries. I came because my mother called me from what was supposed to be a family dinner and told me she was being pressured to sign legal documents." He reached across the table and pulled the power of attorney document toward him, his movements deliberate and controlled. The paper made a sharp sound as he slid it across the white tablecloth. His eyes scanned the text with the same focused intensity he probably used to read patient charts, quickly, thoroughly, missing nothing. "This is interesting," he said after a moment, his voice dangerously quiet. "This isn't a standard power of attorney. This is a durable financial power of attorney with immediate effect and remarkably broad powers." He looked up at Henry. "This would give you access to her bank accounts, her retirement funds, her home equity, her investments. Everything she owns, essentially." "Dr. Johnson, if you'd let me explain the reasoning behind," Thomas Brennan started. "I'm not interested right now." Marcus set the document down and turned to me. "Mom, did you ask Henry or Tanisha to help you manage your finances?" "No, baby. I did not." My voice was steady now, stronger with my son beside me. "Have you experienced any confusion about your bills, your accounts, or your financial obligations?" "None at all." "Have you missed any payments, forgotten any important appointments, or shown any signs of cognitive decline?" "No, Marcus. I'm perfectly fine." He nodded once, then turned back to the lawyers. So, let me understand this completely. My mother, who is cognitively intact, financially competent, and hasn't requested assistance, was invited to what she believed was a reconciliation dinner with her daughter. Instead, she was ambushed by 3 attorneys and presented with documents that would essentially strip her of financial autonomy. The unnamed third lawyer finally spoke up, his voice defensive. That's not accurate at all. We're here to discuss options for Mrs. Jenkins's future care and her future care. Marcus leaned back in his chair, and I saw something in his expression that reminded me so much of Harold, that quiet, simmering anger that was somehow more intimidating than any raised voice. My mother is 62 years old. She volunteers at the library. She takes yoga classes. She has coffee with her book club every Sunday morning. What exactly about her current situation requires future care planning with your firm? Henry cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the conversation. Dr. Johnson, with all due respect, you don't understand the full situation here. Your mother's house needs repairs. She's living on a fixed income, and we're simply trying to ensure. Her house is fine, actually. Marcus pulled out his own phone and scrolled through something. I was there last Tuesday. I helped her replace the washer on her kitchen faucet. The roof was replaced 3 years ago. The HVAC system is well maintained. The foundation is solid. He looked up. Would you like me to continue listing the things about my mother's house that I know and you apparently don't? Silence settled over the table again. As for her fixed income, Marcus continued, that's called a pension and Social Security. It's what most retired Americans live on. The fact that my mother manages it responsibly and doesn't want to drain her retirement fund for a $65,000 wedding doesn't indicate financial incompetence. It indicates financial wisdom. Tanisha's face flushed red. Marcus, you don't know what you're talking about. Don't I, though? He turned to look at his sister directly, and the disappointment in his eyes was crushing. I know that you asked Mama for $65,000. I know she offered you $15,000 instead, which is incredibly generous considering her circumstances. And I know that when she didn't give you what you wanted, you cut her off for 3 weeks. We needed time to think about, she started. Time to plan this ambush, you mean? He gestured at the lawyers at the documents. Time to find attorneys who specialize in elder law and convince them that a healthy, competent 62-year-old woman needs someone else to manage her money. Richard Kirk tried again, his voice taking on a soothing, professional tone. Dr. Johnson, perhaps if we could speak privately, I could help you understand the benefits of proactive financial planning for aging parents. She's not aging inappropriately. Marcus's voice was sharp now. She's aging exactly as she should be. And the only proactive planning I see here is you planning to access her assets. Henry stood up, his patience clearly exhausted. I think we need to take a break from this conversation. Dr. Johnson, perhaps you and your mother could discuss this privately, and we can reconvene when. I'm not asking, Henry. Marcus didn't raise his voice, didn't stand up, didn't make any aggressive movements. He just spoke with absolute finality. I'm telling you right now. I need 10 minutes alone with my mother. You, Tanisha, and these 3 gentlemen can wait at the bar, or outside, or in your cars. I truly don't care which. But you're leaving this table for 10 minutes. The 2 men stared at each other. Henry's jaw was clenched, his hands fisted at his sides. Marcus just waited, calm and immovable as stone. Finally, Richard Kirk stood, gathering his documents. Perhaps a brief recess would be beneficial for everyone. Gentlemen. He gestured to his associates, who quickly collected their briefcases. Henry looked at Tanisha. Let's go, sweetheart. But she protested. Now, Tanisha. His voice had an edge I'd never heard before, sharp with frustration and barely controlled anger. She stood reluctantly, her hand moving protectively to her stomach. For just a moment, she looked at me, and I thought I saw something in her eyes, regret, maybe, or shame. But then Henry's hand was on her elbow, steering her toward the bar area where the lawyers had already congregated. And then it was just Marcus and me, sitting at a table littered with legal documents and abandoned water glasses, in a restaurant that had witnessed my silver anniversary and was now witnessing something far more painful. Marcus turned to me, and his professional mask crumbled. "Mom, what's really happening here? Tell me everything, please." So I did. I told him about the phone call, about Tanisha's soft voice claiming she'd been wrong, about choosing Franco's specifically because it meant something to me, about walking and expecting reconciliation and finding an ambush instead. And then I told him about the threat, about Tanisha's hand on her stomach, her cold eyes, her final ultimatum: sign the papers or never meet your grandson. I watched my son's face as I spoke. Watched his jaw tighten, his hands curl into fists on the table, his eyes go dark with something that looked like grief mixed with rage. It was a deep, cold fury, the kind that doesn't explode but instead freezes everything it touches. "She threatened you," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "She threatened to keep your grandchild from you if you didn't give her control of your money." That's exactly right. I reached across and took his hand. "But Marcus, I need you to know something very important. I didn't sign anything at all, and I wasn't going to, even before I called you." He looked at me, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Why not, Mom?" I smiled, squeezing his fingers. "Because your father didn't raise a fool, and neither did I." Marcus squeezed my hand back, his expression somewhere between protective fury and pride. "So what do we do now, Mom? Do we just walk out of here?" I shook my head slowly, a small smile playing at the corners of my mouth.
No, baby.
"We're not walking out just yet. In fact, I think we should invite everyone back to the table." He looked at me with confusion. "Mom, you don't have to. I know exactly what I'm doing, sweetheart." I patted his hand and raised my voice slightly. "Henry, Tanisha, gentlemen, please come back now. I've made my decision." I watched them return to the table, watched Henry's expression shift from wary to cautiously hopeful. Richard Kirk settled back into his chair with professional composure, but I could see the anticipation in his eyes. They thought I was breaking. They thought Marcus had talked sense into me, convinced me to just sign and make this easier for everyone. They had no idea at all. "I've thought about everything you've said tonight," I began, my voice calm and measured. "About my age, about my living situation, about the importance of planning ahead. And you're right, actually. You're absolutely right." Tanisha's face lit up with relief. "Mama, I'm so glad you—" "Let me finish, please." I held up my hand. "You're right that I need to plan ahead. That I need to protect myself and my assets. That I need legal representation to ensure my interests are properly safeguarded." Henry leaned forward, that practiced smile returning. "We're very pleased you understand, Mrs. Jenkins. If you'll just sign the power of attorney, we can—" "Oh, I'm not signing your power of attorney." I reached for my purse again, and this time I pulled out my phone with deliberate slowness. "I'm signing my own documents. With my own attorney." The silence that fell over the table was different from before. Heavier. More dangerous. The kind of silence that comes right before thunder. "Your attorney?" Richard Kirk's professional composure slipped slightly. "Mrs. Jenkins, when did you retain counsel?" 2 weeks ago, actually. I was already scrolling through my contacts, finding the number I'd added as a precaution after that first disastrous meeting in my living room. Right after Tanisha and Henry came to my house with their wedding binder and their demands for $65,000. I pressed the call button. It rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. "Louise Qualls speaking." "Louise, it's Denise Jenkins. I'm at Franco's restaurant on Meridian Street." I kept my eyes on Henry as I spoke, watching his face go from confident to confused to something approaching panic. "I need you to bring the documents we discussed. All of them, please." "The full package?" Louise's voice was all business. "Including the investigative report?" "Everything, yes." "How soon can you get here?" "I'm 15 minutes away, Denise. I'll be right there." She paused. "Are you safe right now?" "I'm very safe.
My son is here with me."
"But I think it's time we put everything on the table. Don't you agree? I absolutely agree. See you shortly. I ended the call and set my phone down gently. Louise Qualls. She's my attorney. She'll be here in 15 minutes. Thomas Brennan found his voice first. Mrs. Jenkins, I don't understand at all. If you'd already retained counsel, why didn't you mention this earlier? Because I wanted to see how far you'd go, I said simply. I wanted to hear exactly what you'd say, what threats you'd make, what lies you'd tell. And you didn't disappoint, not at all. Tanisha's face had gone pale. Mama, what are you talking about? What lies? I turned to look at my daughter, really look at her, and felt something inside me harden into steel. The lies about my mental state. The lies about my financial mismanagement. The lies about missed payments and confusion about bills. Those aren't lies, though. Henry started. Yes, they are.
My voice was ice now.
And I can prove it. Would you like to know what else I can prove, Henry? He didn't answer. He just stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. I can prove that 3 weeks ago, you spent 2 afternoons talking to my neighbors. Mrs. Patterson at number 42. Mr. Chun at number 38. You asked them about my mental state, whether I seemed confused, whether I was taking care of my property properly. Henry's face went rigid. That's not. I was just. You were building a case, Marcus interjected, his voice deadly calm. You were gathering evidence to support a competency challenge. I can also prove, I continued, pulling out my own folder from my purse. I've been carrying it all evening waiting, that you contacted my mailman, Gerald Thompson. You asked him about my mail habits, whether I was keeping up with my bills, whether I seemed oriented to time and place. I spread the folder open on the table. Inside were printed emails, photographs, handwritten notes. Evidence I'd been gathering while they'd been gathering theirs. You also pulled comparable sales on my house, I said, sliding a document across to Richard Kirk. That's a real estate term, isn't it? You were checking to see what my property was worth. Louise helped me obtain the records of that inquiry. Your name is right there on the request, Henry. The unnamed third lawyer, who I'd learned was named James Whitmore, spoke up, his voice tight. Mrs. Jenkins, if you've been conducting surveillance on our client. I haven't conducted anything at all. I smiled sweetly. I've simply been paying attention. You see, when someone starts asking your neighbors invasive questions about your mental health, the neighbors tend to mention it. Mrs. Patterson called me the same evening. She thought it was strange, concerning even. She asked if everything was okay. And Gerald, Marcus asked, his eyes never leaving Henry's face. Gerald and I have been on friendly terms for 15 years now. He delivers my mail. I bring him lemonade in the summer. When a strange man in an expensive suit started asking him questions about my bill-paying habits, he called me that very night. I pulled out another document, this one a printed screenshot of an email. And this is particularly interesting, I think. This is an email you sent to Dr. Sarah Chun at Mercy General, Marcus's hospital, coincidentally, inquiring about the process for requesting a cognitive evaluation for a family member. Marcus grabbed the paper, his eyes scanning it quickly. You contacted someone in my hospital? Without my mother's knowledge or consent. That's a HIPAA violation waiting to happen, I said calmly. Louise was quite interested in that one as well. Richard Kirk was on his feet now. Mrs. Jenkins, I think there's been a serious misunderstanding here. No misunderstanding at all. I gathered my documents back into the folder. You wanted to paint me as an incompetent, elderly woman who couldn't manage her own affairs. You wanted to build a case for guardianship or conservatorship, didn't you? Get control of my assets, pay for the fancy wedding, the marble bathrooms, the designer dresses. I looked at Tanisha, and my voice softened with sadness. But what you didn't count on, baby girl, was that your mother isn't the confused old woman you needed me to be. I'm a woman who worked for 38 years in a public school system. I've dealt with manipulative parents, scheming administrators, and budget cuts that would make your head spin. Mama, please. Tanisha's voice cracked. I'm not finished yet. I straightened in my chair. What you also didn't count on was that I'd recognize the signs. That I'd notice Henry's sudden interest in my neighbors. That I'd pay attention when questions started circulating about my mental state. That I'd be smart enough to document everything, to save every text message, to note every conversation. I pulled out one final document, a photograph. It showed Henry standing outside my house, taking pictures with his phone. This was taken by Mr. Chun from his upstairs window, I said, sliding it across the table. 2 weeks ago, around 9 in the morning, you spent 20 minutes photographing my house from different angles. The peeling paint on the garage, the crack in the driveway, the overgrown bushes by the mailbox. Building your case, weren't you, Henry? His mouth opened, then closed. No words came out at all. The restaurant door opened, and a woman in her late 50s strode in with the purposeful energy of someone who'd spent 30 years practicing family law. She was carrying a leather briefcase and wearing a navy suit that commanded immediate respect. Louise Qualls had arrived, and she was carrying enough documents to bury them all. Louise Qualls moved through Franco's restaurant like a ship cutting through water, confident, unstoppable, leaving waves of nervous energy in her wake. She reached our table, set her briefcase down with a solid thunk that sounded almost like a gavel, and surveyed the scene with a sharp assessment of someone who'd seen this exact scenario play out 100 times before. Good evening, everyone. Her voice was warm, but carried an edge of steel underneath. I'm Louise Qualls, Mrs. Jenkins's attorney, and you must be Mr. Kirk and his associates. Richard Kirk stood, extending his hand with professional courtesy. Miss Qualls, I wasn't aware that Mrs. Jenkins had retained counsel. Perhaps we could have coordinated this meeting more effectively if you'd known I existed? Louise shook his hand briefly, then turned to me with a smile. Denise, are you all right? You sounded calm on the phone, but I know this has been quite an evening. I'm perfectly fine now, Louise. Thank you for coming so quickly. I gestured to the chair beside me. Please sit down. I think everyone here needs to hear what we've prepared. Louise settled into the chair, opened her briefcase with practiced efficiency, and pulled out a stack of documents at least 2 inches thick. She arranged them on the table with deliberate care, each paper placed exactly where she wanted it. Before we begin, Louise said, her eyes moving from lawyer to lawyer, I want to make something absolutely clear. I'm here to ensure that Mrs. Denise Jenkins's family relationships aren't being exploited for financial gain. I'm here to protect her assets, her autonomy, and her legal rights. Thomas Brennan shifted uncomfortably. Miss Qualls, no one here is trying to exploit. Please don't insult my intelligence. Louise's smile didn't waver, but her eyes went cold. I've reviewed the power of attorney document you brought tonight. I've seen the language about immediate effect and broad discretionary powers. I've also reviewed the preliminary competency challenge paperwork that Mr. Smith here has been shopping around to various medical professionals. Henry's face flushed red. That's a private matter. Not anymore, it's not. Louise pulled out a document and slid it toward him. This is a cease and desist letter regarding your inquiries into Mrs. Jenkins's mental and physical health. Any further attempts to contact her doctors, her neighbors, or any other parties regarding her competency will be considered harassment and potential elder abuse. The words elder abuse hung in the air like a bomb that had just been armed. Now, wait just a minute. Richard Kirk tried to interject. I'm not finished, Mr. Kirk. Louise turned to face him directly. Your client, Mr. Smith, has been conducting what can only be described as an investigation into my client's capacity. He's questioned her neighbors, her mail carrier, and attempted to access her medical records. He's photographed her property, pulled real estate comparables, and generally built a case for guardianship. All without her knowledge or consent, and all while she is demonstrably competent. She pulled out another document. This is a formal complaint I've prepared for the State Bar Association, detailing your firm's involvement in what appears to be a coordinated effort to coerce a competent adult into surrendering financial control under duress. Richard Kirk's face went pale. Miss Qualls, I assure you we had no knowledge of any improper investigation. Then you should have done your due diligence, shouldn't you? Louise's voice was pleasant, almost conversational, which somehow made her words more devastating. But let's move past the unpleasantness and get to the heart of the matter. Shall we discuss what Mrs. Jenkins has actually done with her assets? I watched Henry lean forward slightly, his eyes fixed on the documents in front of Louise. This was the moment he'd been waiting for, the revelation of what I'd done, where my money was, how he might still access it. Louise pulled out a blue-backed legal document, the kind used for major legal instruments. 2 weeks ago, Mrs. Jenkins came to my office. We had a very productive conversation about asset protection, estate planning, and how to ensure her wishes would be honored regardless of any future family pressure. She spread the document open so everyone could see the official seals, the notary stamps, the signatures. This is an irrevocable trust, established on October 23rd, with Mrs. Jenkins as the grantor. The trust contains virtually all of her assets, her home, her retirement accounts, her savings, her investments. Everything of significant value. Tanisha's hand flew to her mouth. Mama, what did you do? I protected myself, baby. My voice was gentle but firm. I did what you forced me to do when you came into my home and demanded $65,000 I couldn't afford to give. Louise continued, her finger tracing down the document. The trust is structured to benefit Mrs. Jenkins's children, both born and unborn. That means Tanisha, Marcus, and Tanisha's child when he's born. The assets will eventually pass to them according to Mrs. Jenkins's wishes. Henry's expression shifted from confused to hopeful. So Tanisha is a beneficiary? That means we can. Let me finish, please. Louise's voice cut through a sentence like a scalpel. The trustee, the person who controls the trust, who makes all decisions about distributions, who has sole discretion over when and how the beneficiaries receive anything, is Dr. Marcus Johnson. The silence that followed was absolute. I watched the realization dawn on Henry's face like a slow-motion car crash. His mouth opened slightly. His hands gripped the edge of the table. His carefully constructed future, the wedding, the marble bathrooms, the designer lifestyle funded by my retirement, all of it crumbling into dust. Marcus is the trustee? Tanisha's voice was barely a whisper. But that means your brother controls when you receive anything, Marcus said, his voice hard. And before you ask, no, Tanisha. No, I will not authorize $65,000 for your wedding. No, I will not approve funds for marble bathrooms or designer gowns or whatever other luxury purchases Henry has convinced you that you need. Louise pulled out another page. The trust also contains specific provisions. Any beneficiary who contests the trust, who harasses Mrs. Jenkins, who attempts to coerce her or manipulate her, will forfeit their interest entirely. The assets would then pass to the remaining beneficiaries and designated charities. You can't do this. Henry was on his feet now, his composure completely shattered. That money belongs to Tanisha's family. It's her inheritance. You can't just lock it away where we can't. Where you can't access it, you mean? I stood up slowly, meeting his eyes. That money isn't an inheritance, Henry. It's my life savings. I earned it over 38 years of teaching. I saved it, invested it, protected it. And I'll be damned if I let you drain it for a wedding that costs more than most people make in a year. Mrs. Jenkins, Richard Kirk tried one last time, his professional mask back in place. Surely we can reach some reasonable compromise here. If you'll just consider. There's nothing left to consider. Louise gathered her documents with efficient movements. The trust is irrevocable. Mrs. Jenkins cannot change it even if she wanted to. The assets are protected. The trustee has sole discretion. And any further harassment will result in legal action. She pulled out one final document. This is a protection order I've prepared, ready to file. It would prevent Mr. Smith and anyone acting on his behalf from contacting Mrs. Jenkins, visiting her home, or communicating with her in any way without her express permission. A restraining order? Tanisha's voice cracked. Mama, you'd really do that to us? Not to you, baby. I reached across the table, but she pulled away.
Tim.
To the man who convinced you that your mother's retirement fund was yours to spend. Who coached you to threaten me with my own grandchild. Who systematically investigated me like a criminal just to prove I was incompetent. I looked at Henry, and all the fear I'd felt earlier was gone. All the heartbreak had hardened into something unbreakable. You wanted my money so badly. You schemed and plotted and manipulated my own daughter to get it. But here's what you failed to understand, Henry. I'm not some helpless old woman you can bully into submission. Louise snapped her briefcase shut with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. Gentlemen, Ms. Jenkins, I believe this meeting is concluded. Mrs. Jenkins has made her position clear. The trust is established and irrevocable. Further attempts to access her assets or challenge her competency will be met with appropriate legal action. Richard Kirk was already gathering his documents, his associates following suit with barely concealed haste. They knew when they'd lost. They knew when to cut their losses and retreat. But Henry just stood there, staring at the trust document like it was written in a language he couldn't comprehend. All his plans, all his calculations, all his careful manipulation, worthless now. The money he'd been counting on, planning to spend, expecting to control, it was locked away forever behind a brother who despised him and a legal structure he couldn't break. This isn't over, he said finally, his voice low and dangerous. You can't just... Actually, I can. I picked up my purse, linked my arm through Marcus's. And I have. Louise, thank you for everything. Send me the bill for tonight's services. Already added to your account, Denise. Louise smiled warmly. And might I say, you handled this beautifully. Just beautifully. I turned to leave, then paused and looked back at my daughter. She was sitting frozen in her chair, one hand on her stomach, tears streaming down her face. For just a moment, I saw the little girl who used to bring me dandelions from the yard, who'd curl up in my lap during thunderstorms, who'd made me a construction paper card every Mother's Day. But that little girl was gone now. In her place was a woman who'd chosen greed over love. When you're ready to have a real conversation, Tanisha, when you're ready to talk without lawyers or demands or threats, you call me. But call me alone. I glanced at Henry. Leave the financial scheming at the door. Then Marcus and I walked out of Franco's together, leaving behind the wreckage of a family meal that had become a battlefield, and a daughter who'd gambled everything on her mother's weakness. She'd bet on the wrong horse entirely. The November air hit my face the moment we stepped outside Franco's, cool and clean, washing away the tension that had been suffocating me inside that restaurant. Marcus kept his arm linked through mine as we walked toward the parking lot, and I realized my hands weren't shaking anymore. My heart wasn't racing. The tightness in my chest that had been my constant companion for 3 weeks had finally, blessedly, disappeared. Mom, are you okay? Marcus asked, stopping beside his car. That was incredibly intense. I'm better than okay, sweetheart. I turned to look back at the restaurant, at the warm glow of lights through the windows, at the life continuing inside while my own life had just fundamentally changed. I'm free, Marcus. For the first time in months, I feel completely free. He pulled me into a hug, the kind of embrace that reminded me he was still my little boy underneath the doctor's credentials and professional demeanor. I'm so proud of you, Mom. The way you handled that, the way you planned ahead. Dad would have been so proud, too. Your father taught me to be strong, I said against his shoulder. But you were the one who came when I called. You dropped everything, left your patients, and drove across town because your mother needed you. Always, Mom. Every single time. He pulled back, keeping his hands on my shoulders. What happens now, though? With Tanisha? I took a deep breath, considering the question I'd been asking myself for weeks. That's up to her entirely. If she wants to rebuild our relationship, she knows how to reach me. But it has to be real, Marcus. No more lawyers, no more schemes, no more using my grandchild as leverage. And Henry, Marcus's jaw tightened. What if he tries something else? Then Louise will handle it properly. I squeezed his hand. But honestly, I don't think he will. You saw his face when Louise explained the trust. He knows he's lost access to what he wanted most, my money. Without that, I'm not useful to him anymore. Marcus walked me to my car, waiting until I was safely inside before heading to his own vehicle. As I started the engine, I caught one last glimpse through Franco's windows. I could see figures moving around inside, Probably the lawyers making their hasty exit. Probably Henry and Tanisha having the conversation they should have had months ago. But that wasn't my concern now. I'd done what I needed to do. The rest was up to them. Life has a funny way of delivering justice when you least expect it. 2 weeks after the dinner at Franco's, I was in my front yard raking leaves when my new neighbor, Janet Waters, came over with a cup of coffee and a piece of information that made me believe in karma all over again. "Denise, I hope you don't mind me mentioning this," Janet said, handing me the coffee. "But you know that young man who was asking questions about you a few weeks back? The one in the expensive suits." "Henry Smith," I said, taking the cup gratefully. "My daughter's fiancé." "Former fiancé, perhaps." Janet's eyebrows rose. "Well, I thought you should know. My husband works at Morrison Financial downtown, and apparently Mr. Smith is having some serious professional difficulties right now. Something about frozen accounts and irregularities in client funds." I nearly dropped my coffee. Frozen accounts? What kind of irregularities? "I don't know all the details, obviously." Janet lowered her voice even though we were alone in my yard. "But apparently there's an internal investigation happening. His accounts have been frozen pending review, and there's talk of possible suspension." So Henry's financial house wasn't as solid as he'd pretended. The man who demanded access to my retirement fund, who'd presented himself as a successful financial advisor with investment opportunities and portfolio diversification strategies, that man was under investigation for financial misconduct. The irony wasn't lost on me at all. "Thank you for telling me, Janet." I set down my coffee cup and went back to raking. "I appreciate you looking out for me. That's what neighbors do, dear." She patted my shoulder. "And for what it's worth, when he was here asking questions about your mental state, I told him you were the sharpest 62-year-old I'd ever met." More information trickled in over the following weeks, bits and pieces from various sources that painted a picture of consequences finally catching up with carefully laid plans. Mrs. Patterson from number 42 mentioned seeing Tanisha's wedding planner leaving her house looking frustrated, carrying boxes of expensive samples that apparently wouldn't be needed anymore. The $65,000 wedding had been scaled back significantly, according to neighborhood gossip. Mr. Chen saw contractors removing materials from what was supposed to be Tanisha and Henry's new house, the one with the Italian marble bathrooms. Postponed indefinitely, the lead contractor had told him when asked. And Marcus, during one of his twice-weekly visits, told me that Tanisha had called him. Just once. She hadn't asked about the trust or the money. She'd just asked if I was okay, if I was healthy, if I was happy. "What did you tell her?" I asked, setting down the lemonade I'd been pouring. "I told her you were thriving, actually." Marcus smiled. "Because you are, Mom. You look better than you have in months."
He was right about that.
The weight I'd been carrying, the anxiety, the guilt, the constant second-guessing of my decision, all of it had lifted. I was sleeping through the night again. My appetite had returned. I'd even started attending yoga classes again, something I'd stopped doing during those dark 3 weeks of silence. But more than that, I'd found a new purpose entirely. The Riverside Community Center had been looking for volunteers for their senior advocacy program, and Louise had mentioned it during one of our follow-up meetings. They help elderly residents understand financial documents, spot potential scams, recognize signs of exploitation, she'd explained. "Given your recent experience, I thought you might be interested." I'd signed up the very next day. Now, every Tuesday and Thursday morning, I sat at a small desk in the community center's bright, welcoming office, helping seniors navigate the confusing world of legal documents and family financial pressures. I reviewed power of attorney forms, explained the difference between revocable and irrevocable trusts, and most importantly, I listened to stories that sounded heartbreakingly familiar. Stories about children who suddenly took interest in their parents' finances right around inheritance time. Stories about guilt and manipulation and threats wrapped in the language of concern. Stories about people who felt trapped between love for their children and protection of their own security. "My son wants me to add his name to my bank account," a 78-year-old woman named Dorothy told me one morning, her hands trembling as she held the paperwork. "He says it's just for emergencies, but something feels wrong about it." I took her hands in mine, studying them. Tell me more, Dorothy. What does your gut say? My gut says he wants access to my money now, not later. Her voice was barely a whisper. But he's my son, you know? How can I say no to my own son? The same way I said no to my own daughter. I told her, and then I shared my story. Not the sanitized version, not the polite version, but the real, raw truth of what had happened at Franco's restaurant that November evening. When I finished, Dorothy was crying. But they were tears of relief, not sadness. So, it's not wrong to protect myself? She asked. Even from family? Especially from family, sometimes. I squeezed her hands. Because the people who truly love us don't put us in positions where we have to choose between our security and their approval. 6 weeks after the dinner at Franco's, I was leaving the community center on a Thursday afternoon when I saw a familiar car parked across the street. A silver sedan, expensive and well-maintained, with someone sitting in the driver's seat. Tanisha had come looking for me. I crossed the street slowly, giving myself time to prepare, time to decide what I wanted to say. When I reached the car, she rolled down the window, and I saw her face, thinner now, tired, her eyes red-rimmed like she'd been crying recently. "Hi, Mama," she said softly. "Can we talk, please?" I looked at her for a long moment, this woman who'd once been my whole world, who'd called me selfish and threatened to keep my grandchild from me, who'd chosen money over love. Then I looked at the community center behind me, at the place where I was helping other people avoid the pain she'd caused me. "Are you alone, baby?" I asked. "No Henry, no lawyers, no schemes?" "Just me, Mama. I promise it's just me." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I've made so many mistakes, and I don't know how to fix them." I opened the passenger door and got in, because I was her mother. And no matter what she'd done, no matter how much she'd hurt me, that was something I couldn't stop being. But things were different now. I was different now. And she was going to have to earn her way back, one honest conversation at a time. 6 months passed like pages turning in a book I'd already read, predictable in some ways, surprising in others. Tanisha and I had met 3 more times after that first conversation in her car. Each meeting was civil, carefully neutral, like 2 diplomats negotiating a peace treaty neither side fully trusted. She told me that Henry's financial troubles had worsened, that the wedding had been postponed indefinitely, that they were reassessing their priorities. She never apologized for the ambush at Franco's, never acknowledged the threats she'd made. But she also never asked about the trust or my money, which I suppose was progress of a sort. Then, on a warm April morning while I was watering my garden, my phone rang. Marcus's name lit up the screen. "Mom, are you sitting down?" His voice was breathless, excited in a way I hadn't heard since he'd matched into his residency program years ago. "I'm standing in my garden, sweetheart. What's happening?" But even as I asked, I knew. Somehow I already knew. Tanisha had the baby. Last night, around 11:30. He paused, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "It's a girl, Mom. A healthy baby girl. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. My hand went to my chest, pressing against the sudden surge of emotion. A granddaughter. Not the grandson Tanisha had been expecting, but a little girl. A girl who would need her grandmother's strength, her grandmother's wisdom. Is everyone healthy? Is Tanisha okay? The words came automatically, the mother in me overriding everything else. Everyone's perfectly fine. She had a smooth delivery. Marcus hesitated. Mom. She named her Eleanor. Eleanor Rose Jenkins. After Grandma Eleanor. My mother's name. The woman who'd raised me to be strong, to stand up for myself, to never let anyone, not even family, treat me like I was less than I was worth. Tanisha had given her daughter my mother's name, and I didn't know if it was an olive branch or another manipulation. That's beautiful, Marcus. That's really beautiful. I sat down on my garden bench, suddenly needing the support. When can I meet her? Another pause, longer this time. Tanisha asked me to call you. She wants you to come to the hospital this afternoon. She said she wants you there, wants you to meet Eleanor. There it was. The invitation. The opening. The moment I'd been simultaneously hoping for and dreading for 6 months. And Henry? I asked carefully. Will he be there as well?
He's there now, yes.
But Mom, you don't have to. Let me think about it, sweetheart. Let me call you back shortly. I ended the call and sat in my garden, surrounded by the flowers I'd planted, the life I'd rebuilt, the peace I'd fought so hard to create. A granddaughter. My Eleanor. But what would be the cost of meeting her? I called Louise that afternoon and we talked for an hour. Not as attorney and client, but as two women who understood that love and boundaries weren't mutually exclusive. You have every right to meet your granddaughter, Louise said. But you also have every right to set the terms of that meeting. I don't want to be manipulated again, Louise. I was pacing my living room now, my phone pressed to my ear. I don't want to walk into another trap. Then don't walk into it. Her voice was firm, practical. You go on your terms, with your conditions clearly stated. If those conditions aren't met, you leave immediately. You hold the power here, Denise. Don't forget that part. What if she's really changed, though? What if having the baby has made her see things differently? Then she'll respect your boundaries, Louise said simply. And if she doesn't, you'll have your answer about whether she's really changed or not. We spent the rest of the call drafting a letter, not an email, not a text message, but an actual letter that I would write by hand and send through the mail. Something permanent. Something that couldn't be deleted or claimed to have been misunderstood. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with my mother's fountain pen, the one she'd given me when I graduated from college, and wrote the words that would define the future of my relationship with my daughter and granddaughter. Dear Tanisha, congratulations on the birth of Eleanor Rose. I'm honored that you chose my mother's name. Your grandmother was a woman of remarkable strength and dignity, and I hope her namesake inherits those qualities. Marcus told me you'd like me to visit the hospital. I would very much like to meet my granddaughter. However, after the events of last November, I need to establish clear boundaries for our relationship going forward. I will visit Eleanor, but these visits will take place at times and locations that I choose, with Marcus present as a neutral party. This is non-negotiable at all. During these visits, there will be no discussion of the trust, my finances, or any legal matters whatsoever. If these topics are raised by you or by Henry, I will end the visit immediately and leave. I will not sign any documents, make any financial commitments, or discuss my estate planning. These matters are settled and final. If you want me in Eleanor's life, it will be as her grandmother, not as a source of funding, not as an ATM, not as someone to be manipulated or threatened. I will love her unconditionally, the way I loved you. But I will not allow myself to be victimized again. I understand if these terms are unacceptable to you. I understand if you choose to limit my access to Eleanor because I won't give you what you want financially. That will be painful, but it will also tell me everything I need to know about your priorities. I will always love the daughter you were, Tanisha, the little girl who brought me dandelions and made me construction paper cards. The young woman I put through college, supported through every challenge, loved with everything I had. But I am no longer available to be victimized by the person you've chosen to become. If you can accept these boundaries, call Marcus and we'll arrange a time for me to meet Eleanor. If you can't accept them, I'll understand. The choice is yours entirely. With love and sadness.
Mom.
I read the letter 3 times, making small changes, ensuring every word said exactly what I meant. Then I folded it carefully, placed it in an envelope, and addressed it to Tanisha's home address, not the hospital, where emotion and exhaustion might cloud her judgment, but her home, where she could read it privately and make a clear-headed decision. The walk to the mailbox felt longer than usual. The envelope in my hand seemed to carry the weight of everything. My past as Tanisha's mother, my future as Eleanor's grandmother, my present as a woman who'd finally learned that love without boundaries wasn't love at all. It was martyrdom, and I was done being a martyr. I opened the mailbox, held the letter for one more moment, then placed it inside and closed the metal door with a soft click. The sound felt final, decisive, like a chapter ending and a new one beginning. As I walked back to my house, I felt that same sense of freedom I'd experienced outside Franco's 6 months earlier. But this time it was deeper, more complete. I wasn't just free from immediate threat. I was free from the desperate need to be needed, from the fear that setting boundaries meant losing love. I'd learned something my mother had tried to teach me decades ago. You teach people how to treat you. And if you accept mistreatment in the name of love, you're not actually loving anyone, not them, and certainly not yourself. Mrs. Patterson waved from her porch. Mr. Chen nodded as he retrieved his mail. Janet Waters called out asking if I wanted coffee tomorrow morning. My neighbors, my community, my life that I'd built through 38 years of work and sacrifice and strength. This was enough. I was enough. With or without Tanisha's acceptance, with or without access to Eleanor, I had built something that no one could take away from me. My dignity, my autonomy, my peace. Inside my house, I made myself a cup of tea and sat in Harold's old chair, the one I'd reupholstered 3 times because I couldn't bear to replace it. I thought about my mother, Eleanor, and how she'd stood up to her own family when they tried to tell her what to do with her life. How she'd walked away from people who loved her conditionally, who wanted her compliance more than her happiness. I hope I made you proud, Mama, I whispered to the empty room. I hope I'm teaching little Eleanor, my Eleanor, the same lessons you taught me. My phone buzzed. A text message from Marcus. Tanisha asked when you're coming. What should I tell her? I typed back. Tell her to check her mail in a few days. Then the decision is hers to make. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, I'm proud of you, Mom. Whatever happens, I'm so proud of you. I set the phone down and looked around my small, paid-off house. At the furniture I'd reupholstered, the walls I'd painted, the life I'd preserved. At the photos of my children when they were young, before money and manipulation had complicated everything. I was a woman who could not be moved. Not by threats, not by guilt, not by the weaponization of love. And if that meant I had to love my family from a distance, behind boundaries they might never accept, then that was a price I was finally willing to pay. Because I'd learned the hardest lesson a mother can learn. Sometimes loving your children means loving yourself more. The letter would arrive in 2 days. Tanisha would read it, make her choice, and our future would unfold from there. But whatever she decided, I would remain unmoved, unshaken. Free in a way I hadn't been since she'd first walked into my living room with that wedding binder and those impossible demands. I was Denise Jenkins, teacher, mother, survivor. And I was someone who could not be moved anymore. Did you like my story? And what city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. Give us a like if you enjoyed this story. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. By the way, don't forget to subscribe. It encourages me to keep bringing more stories like this. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.